Hello and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co host, Cameron McAllister.
And I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
In today's podcast, we start by talking about the odd trend of food hacks and basically mixing and matching all different kinds of cuisines. And we talk about how this is actually a picture of our increasingly globalized world, but also it's a picture of overabundance and deep-seated restlessness. So see, we can take the fun out of anything, but we're going to try to be helpful here, and I think we are helpful. If you like what we do, you find value in it, you can support us by going to www.toltogether.com, click the donate button, and of course also spread the word, leave a review, tell people about us. Thanks a lot.
Cameron, the first time that I flew British Airways, I was a little bit surprised that they fed curry as the meal of choice on the flight. And then after living in England a little bit, I recognized that India had basically taken over British cuisine.
Good.
We when we lived there, we had to look hard to find somebody to, go eat some parsnips and mint jelly on lamb with, because by and large, culturally speaking, I'm still not exactly sure what British cuisine is. Today, we want to talk a little bit. It sounds like we're going to talk about food. We are going to talk about food a lot, but take this in a more reflective direction of how the globalization of food and choices kind of stands in as a marker in some ways for a shifting dynamic from everything from worldview to tradition to religious sentiments and the way in which we focus on things. So, Cameron, what's the wonkiest food menagerie that you've recently experienced or seen, or what are some of those as you kind of pitter pattered around the globe, odd ways in which you've seen the foods of other cultures influence or take over other? So, like sometimes you're at a place and you're like, this food just doesn't make sense to be here,
Mm-hmm.
and go.
Well, I, for one, am grateful for curries being in Britain because sorry, I know I'm going to offend some people, but you know what? I have British heritage and it's closer than most here in the United States. Everybody says, "Oh, I'm from Scotland or from Ireland." My father is actually bona fide Scottish. British cuisine is horrible.
How do you feel about haggis?
British cuisine is awful. Okay, and curry is far superior. So just count your lucky stars if you're in London or wherever it is you get to have this kind of food. But it is interesting because it's a picture of our changing landscape. So I mean, not too long ago, the take sushi. At one point, sushi was highly
Mm,
exotic, and because the only place you could get sushi was in Japan or other Asian countries, and so a lot of people here, still people who are in the boomer generation, sometimes are a little bit apprehensive about something like sushi because they still just think of it as, oh, this is raw. This is whereas younger now, kids who are barely older than my kids, and my kids are fairly young, so my son is 8. Kids who are 12 and up, their favorite food is sushi. So that's a picture of how everything is now available. You can get sushi anywhere you want. You can get sushi in Paris, Texas at this point. So,
Probably at the Walmart deli.
yes,
I don't know.
yes.
Just guessing.
So that's a picture of the kind of
Now, whether or not it's good sushi, we might want to
you
qualify
have to
some things
qualify
there,
that.
but conceptually, the idea
But
is
yeah,
there.
so everything's now available. I mean, you got this is a kind of feature of globalization that we're seeing very practically. Food is a very apt picture of the overabundance and also some of the dilution that's happening. So let me give you a specific example that just comes to mind because I like to cook. It's a hobby for me. I enjoy cooking. But so I watch a lot of cooking videos. Basically, I have the online habits of a middle-aged housewife. So that's just so there you have that. Some people work on, engines and build tables, I'm scrolling and looking at recipes. But one thing that you can't fail to notice, I'm also a nerd, so I can take the fun out of just about anything. That is a skill I'm very confident about, and I know I can do it. And so let me take the fun out of food for just a second here and get deep on this. But these food hacks, these food hack videos where, oh, you take a bag of Cheetos and you stick them on a Chick-fil-A sandwich, or you take a little bit of Korean barbecue and you mix it in with some macaroni and cheese, and you just blend and fuse all these different cuisines together. And it's kind of a picture for what's going on in our world in terms of the fact that we're a major melting pot now, and so there's a lot of good here. I mean, there's this international feel, this cosmopolitan feel increasingly everywhere. And a lot of this has to do, of course, with the internet and just the way we have access to all of these different cultures, but also has to do with the international population that we have. I mean, I can see this at my children's schools and all of these different cultures being brought together, all this food, but then now we're mixing and matching. It reminds me a little bit of Tara Isabella Burton's phrase for people who take a little bit of different bits of paganism and stitch them together for their own lifestyle. She calls this the religiously remixed. We're remixing and blending and mixing everything. And there may be some good tastes here, but also there's just so much dilution is definitely taking place. We're losing something in the midst of all of this abundance. There's simply just too much of everything. And so that's kind of where I've been going mentally as I see all of these food hacks and I see all of this abundance. I'm also seeing kind of a diminishment that's taking place as well.
Yeah, is there a sense in which there's a bit of a food as entertainment and status and identity that is so the novelty of the culinary experience is part of the adventure. So it's gone beyond just necessity for sure. I mean, obviously we don't all have to eat sushi. Um but the other part that's there is not just the ideological thing, but it's also the globalization of the um yeah, the global economy. Like it's a weird, like, if you're eating grapefruit in February, that's interesting. I mean, it's amazing as far as just the
Yes.
global supply chain that you can have the foods that you have where you want them, when you want them. Um, and I live at a place that's pretty remote. So most of the people that I know shop for groceries 10 to 12 times a year. So they're driving a couple hours, loading up on a month plus supply of whatever. And so, have pop up on your phone, oh, go grab some fresh ginger. Yeah, right. There isn't any fresh ginger for 3 hours from here, probably. Um, and so there was a time, and I think, in which you said, "Here are the resources that I have. What can I make with this?" Now it's flipped around the other. You need the idea, and then you can go find the supplies. And so that's just, within our lifetime, a real shift. Where growing up, we ate meat and potatoes and green
Mhm.
beans, like those were the three big, and various kinds of bread, because those were the locally available resources through certain parts of the year in winter. So there to go back to where you started, there's something beautiful about the variety and the options that we have, both in the ideological transfer of information and recipes and what's available, but then also just actually having legitimate access to those resources is not globally normal. Most people don't have that level of 42 kinds of pepper jelly at their local Wegmans or whatever. Um, there is something about abundance that is worth celebrating.
Of course. But then let's take two highly distinctive foods. Let's take Italian food and Japanese cuisine. So because there's a lot of mixing and matching that I see between these two food groups because they both involve food that one has pasta, one has noodles. And so mixing and matching with marinara sauces and all of that. Now, will that get you something that can you get something that tastes good by doing that? Well, yes, you can. But is there a kind of diminishment that's happening there too? Yes, as both Italians and plenty of and Japanese people would tell you, and others who are just enthusiasts about those different forms of cuisine, there's something special about the distinctiveness of a particular region and the foods that they have developed, the ways in which in Italy, it's not just the way the pasta is made, it's also the quality of the olives, for instance, that makes the food so distinctive. And this is kind of a picture one of the major revolutions, one of the many revolutions of the modern world is the erosion of cultural identity. that happens. Some of it is politically enforced. I think the most easy example to point to here is the European Union and some of the tensions that have erupted there with many nations. Think of a nation like Hungary, for instance, or think, of course, of Brexit, the whole Brexit, the major decision there. But part of and whatever our I know everybody listening, how did we get from mixing and matching food on TikTok to Brexit? But hang in there for a second. But, I mean, let's set aside some of the political considerations of all of those issues and just think about how hard it is to be tied to a specific region and a place.
Well, yeah, but it's almost gone. I don't
Yeah,
know that it so because and the reason I say that is traditional Italian pasta made in Italy, a huge percentage of that wheat is grown in
yeah,
North Dakota. Italian traditional Italian pasta is sourced
yeah.
from America. If you go to Italy and eat, I mean, it's a wild world. So there was a time in which that type of wheat that is best for that was grown in Italy for sure, but it can be done cheaper and more efficiently in America now. So it that to me just symbolizes the entirety of the hilarity of the
That's a
whole
perfect
situation.
example, and there is a sense in which I think, Nathan, we can't go back. That's not me putting my arms just sticking
No.
my arms up in the air and saying, "It's all hopeless. We should just get with the times and do as the Romans do right now." But it is to say that part of this whole modern process that has brought us to this globalized moment, there are irreversible elements to this where, yeah, the whole arrangement and infrastructure is different now. But and again, I'm not necessarily knocking, you know, trying, being eclectic, but there is a sense in which mixing and matching all of this overabundance is leading to a form of diminishment and dilution. So I guess what I'm using this I'm trying to do here, however clumsily, is use this as a window into saying, I think part of the trick these days to living well and wisely is coming up with various strategies for doing less better. And I think that really is something that needs to be applied to all of the categories of our life, in our lives, including our diets. I remember, I mean, a lot of thoughtful people down the ages, from sages and philosophers to saints, have stressed that it's pretty good to eat fairly plain food most of the time and save feasting for special occasions. One recent example was Friar Thomas Hopko. His 55 maxims for Christian living are extremely helpful. I always recommend them. I think I've recommended them on here before. But one of them is, I think his wording is eat very, fancy foods sparingly or something like that. He's not saying don't, I mean, if you're a Christian, you believe in feasting. You believe in the marriage supper of the Lamb. You're excited about feasting and fellowship are wonderful, beautiful things. But part of what makes them wonderful and beautiful is that they don't happen just every single day. And we do live at a time where not just in the category of food, but massive overindulgence is available to you every day, every second of every day. You can scroll until something pleases your eye. So we all recognize, I think there's widespread recognition that this is not great for us. That it's first of all, it's dulling our enjoyment, our genuine enjoyment of stuff, because it's desensitizing us and it's leading to deeper and deeper restlessness. It's also leading us to lose self-control and to do and into all sorts of other bad habits where we want constant stimulation all the time. But yeah,
Ca help me here, Cameron, because these are the thoughts bouncing in my mind. Um, how do we like, to what degree does that principle transfer into other
yeah.
areas? So I'm thinking, the world would be a sadder place if we didn't have a basic understanding of Russian literature,
Mm,
or if we didn't have um, and so we can go through these kind of pockets of regions that have, at certain points in times, really produced wild. You can think Damascus steel and knife making. You can think things that are um, Peruvian wool. There are these historical pockets and elements of regions that have Kentucky racehorses. Why do the best racehorses come from Kentucky? Actually has to do with the type of grass that the horses are grazing on that produces the types of bone structure in the horses. Like
Hmm.
that's why you can only have that's why Kentucky is famous for horses is because of actually things that are happy microbially in the soil that produces the grass that the horses eat
Huh.
that train. Like there are hyper
Yeah.
regional there are reasons that these some of these, uh, things
You wouldn't
develop.
get a Dostoevsky in America. Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
You don't get it and you don't get a Kentucky
Yep,
racehorse
yep,
in Florida.
yep.
I
It's an interesting question to raise because obviously Dostoevsky was writing in the 1800s. And I mean, we are all inescapably products of our times. We're not, it's not all we are. We're more than that, of course, but we are products of our times and we reflect those times. Read a biography of Dostoevsky and you'll find that he was thoroughly very much a man of his day. Very swept up in the politics of his day, had some really bizarre theories, thought that Jesus Christ was returning to Moscow, that as in, Jesus would return on a white horse in Moscow of all cities. He was pretty, he had some wacky stuff that was very much a part of his time and his age. Same with Tolstoy, by the way, who was a contemporary of Dostoevsky's. But they were writing uniquely as Russian writers of their time. And part of what makes them special is that they were produced by that soil and among those people and in that milieu. And the question now, Nathan, is what does that is that kind of thing possible these days, and what does it look like today in a world where we really do pretty relentlessly celebrate placelessness almost as a virtue.
Mhm.
You don't think of or in America, let's use some uniquely American examples would be a regional writer like Flannery O'Connor. She's it's easy to pick on Southern writers because the South is such a distinctive setting, and you can talk about some of those, in Flannery O'Connor's case, people will always say, "Oh, yes, she's very grotesque," or the Southern Gothic. Those are all terms that probably annoy the tar out of her. But what does that look like today? It's weird because, I mean, the shape of fiction these days is much more diffuse than that necessarily, and again, you could chalk that up to you look at the way the internet has affected all of this. But
So
I'm
are
wrestling
we
with that.
saying
Yeah,
what do we yeah, well, because I mean, so like Wendellberry, there's a guy
right,
in a place. But
an
other than
outlier.
that, there's the counterexample of if it is foreign or from someplace other than where you are, that's what makes it
Mhm.
good. So sushi has to be good because it's not from where you're from.
It's exotic.
Uh,
Yeah.
maybe that's over. Is the exotic is like well, in Switzerland they think this
Mhm,
about marriage or what like there's almost that it's there's a diminishment of the place in which people are actually in
mhm.
and a glorification of the places that you're not. And maybe that's the traditional the grass is always greener on the other side. But I think more what we're wrestling with is this placelessness of like when basically when everything becomes an option, nothing is concrete. And so I was and you can test this on yourself of like how deeply embedded are you in this and we'll bring it back to food is I can say to you Cameron, what's a traditional family recipe that's been handed down through your family that you really appreciate or still make to this day? I think that question that will largely
Mhm,
disappear
mhm.
in the future because everything has always been an option. It's not like my grandma made these same biscuits every Saturday morning for 40 years. Now that's seen as boring, not as wow, your grandma probably really knows how to make a biscuit.
Or I want this kind of French toast, so I'm just gonna Google it really quickly or, swipe until I find and there's that recipe right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's all I Is it all bad? It's not that's not all bad, but it's undeniable that something's being lost. The now, it's there are people are coming back to some of this. There's a reaction against some of this because but the only way to really react against this is to deliberately slow down. So, the way of putting this I think this will give us a more firm purchase here, Nathan. It was once possible to be a Christian unselfconsciously. Now it's not possible to be a Christian unselfconsciously because Charles Taylor is very helpful on this. You can be a Christian, but you always know that it's fiercely contested and that there are other options on the table. And so in other words, you're a Christian, but that also means you're not a Buddhist. You're not a Hindu. You're not Wicca. You're not
Mhm.
this. You're not that. You're not an atheist. You're not a skeptic. You are this instead. Kind of like, well, I'm choosing this particular show right now on this streaming service. And it used to be, wow, I get to watch this movie. I'm watching Ben-Hur. I'm in the theater. I'm watching Ben-Hur. This is great. Now it's I'm not watching this. I'm not watching this. I'm not watching this. I could be watching this. I could be watching this, but I've chosen this. It better be good. I've read all the reviews I can, but there's still a chance I might not like it, and I'm gonna be, in some way cheated out of my time and my money. There's always some other option. Always.
Well, so but it's not even so to food again, drive down a street near you and try to choose a
Yeah.
restaurant to go to, which nationality, and then choose the restaurant, get into the restaurant, and then look at the
Yep.
14-page menu to try to figure out what dish you're actually gonna have. And I'm saying there is a sense in which in history people didn't have those
No.
options and they just sat down and ate the local sheep and got up and went on with their life.
And they
They
didn't need to worry about it. So that's what I mean by the unselfconscious. So nowadays, you could say, where did you choose to eat? "Oh, I ate at Taco Bell," but you could also just as easily say, "Yeah, I didn't eat at McDonald's. I didn't eat at Burger King. I didn't eat at Jack in the Box. I did," and you list all the ones you missed out on because you went here to the exclusion of all this other stuff. But if the so there's a reaction against this. It has to do with slowing down. It has to do with concentrating more on where you live in your own community, and I think this is good, but you can't do it unselfconsciously. You have to be intentional. You have to
Mhm.
plan. People used to not have to plan this at all. Yeah, you're in a village, somewhere in Cornwall, right? And yes, you're gonna be eating you'll be eating the sheep that are there and the mince pies, yeah, the
Corned
corned
beef.
beef, whatever, yeah, a little Cornish hen, but you're not doing so self-consciously thinking, "Oh, man, this is very virtuous of me to be dining on my regional cuisine and, not diluting it. I'm just enjoying what we have here," and no, I mean, that you're just going about your day, but now you have to do that and you have to make a choice. I mean, and that's interesting.
Here's 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 where I think you're going with this, Cameron.
Yeah, please
Correct
help.
me if I'm wrong. So we hear about FOMO and we think of that as a digital experience. So the fear of missing
Yep.
out, FOMO. And so you're constantly digitally wired so you can keep up with what everybody else is doing because you're afraid you're going to miss out on something that's happening. And I started talking about reverse FOMO, which is that I would miss out on what my kids are doing right now because I'm looking at social media of what everybody else is doing
Mhm.
everywhere. And so there's this I think whipsaw back in the other direction of, yeah, but what if I never learn my family's recipes because I'm always using DoorDash? And so is the fear like to not think that you actually have a place and you're in a space for a reason or you're in a family or in a community and that there are good things within it is a form of pessimism and bleakness that is really, really high that I always have to look elsewhere in order to find anything good. That's a whole ball of wax to chew on its own. And then are there actually things that are physically proximate
Mhm.
to you that are good, true, beautiful, tasty, delicious, um, that you're missing out on because of this massive array of potentiality?
Yeah, I mean, that's a picture of our perpetual sense of restlessness and dissatisfaction, and I think most of us know that too. Even when we drift into that behavior of always living elsewhere, so to speak, and missing out on our actual lives because we're or even we do this with our we talk to people via text or, different social messaging networks. When we're with people we care about the most, supposedly, when we're in the same rooms with them, but we're always talking to somebody who's not there. We do this in so many
Mhm.
different categories, and we all know that. We all know this isn't great. I mean, we all also know that our lives would be vastly improved if we were on our phones way less, for instance. So much of this, practically speaking, our avenue into it is the smartphone. We all know that our lives would be vastly improved, and we're all talk about ironically, lots of influencers are talking about strategies to minimize our addiction to our smartphones on these very platforms, right? That kind of cater to addictions.
Yeah.
But so we know that if we put it aside and then we just focused on the people in our home, the food in our pantries, we would also our lives would improve in the sense that with food, you'll save a ton of money if you don't if you don't resort to DoorDash, by the way. You'll have
Which you can finance
oh,
now,
that's
which is
amazing.
amazing.
But if in other words, a lot of what you're saying, Nathan, is have your eyes open to what is right before you, what you actually have, rather than focusing on what you don't have right now. In other words, what it is you're supposedly missing out on. And yeah, it might be really great to get a pack of hot Cheetos and stick them on a Chick-fil-A sandwich or whatever the latest food hack is, but to actually focus on the people around you and maybe talk to a family member. If you don't know about a family recipe, they are there in your families and say, I mean, I would love to just spend the a day in the kitchen with you and you show me how to make this recipe. The family recipe that I learned, Nathan, was my grandmother is, she was first she was a Italian. She was arrived on the boat from Italy to Ellis Island, became a nurse, and then lived in actually in West Virginia for a while there, Nathan, all the other side of the state from you. But she came from Italy, so her spaghetti is a family recipe, and I remember my mom would not write it down for me. I like a typical, can you just put it in an email or can you, like, take a picture of it?" She didn't have a picture of it. All she knew how to do was make it, and so she made me shadow her in the kitchen, and she showed me, and she imparted it to me the old-fashioned way, and I'm so grateful for it because now I've done that with my kids. My kids absolutely love the spaghetti. It is really good, if I do say so myself. It's not mine. It's my my grandma's, but so now my son has made it with me, and they'll continue to make that with their family, and I didn't write it down for them. I didn't make a video for them. They just stood with me in the kitchen. You can do the same thing. It's a great way to bond with somebody. Cooking together and learning how to cook from somebody is a really that's one example among many. I mean, you can also the other easy example here, Nathan, is the a dad puttering around with a car and fixing it and bringing the son in on the action there, or fixing a lawnmower. I mean, these are wonderful, beautiful. We tend to think of these as, oh, these are pictures of a simpler time. Well, you can still do this, and it's still happening today. But it takes intention and it takes planning, so you don't do it unself consciously anymore, but you can still do it.
When people say it's from a simpler time, they're actually talking about a time in which people's lives were connected to a certain space. And so that's the interesting thing about the cooking recipe is that it's through time in the sense like you're connecting to your ancestors before you. So there's the time dimension there, but it's also usually to a space as well. Same thing with an old car or tractor or something that's been in the family. Um, you can't just you can't email somebody an old car.
Mhm.
You have to physically be there. And so it's not there's no such thing as a simpler time, but there was and could be in the future, I think, a time in which we're more physically proximate spatially to the things and we're more aware of how we fit into that space as our families have in time. And as humans, whether you want to look at it theologically or in physics, is we are hardwired for space and time. And it's hard for us to think outside of space and time. That's some of the big metaphysical questions we bump up against the way in which our minds are structured that we can't think outside of space and time. And so I think the harmony between space and time is maybe the paradigmatic language that we want to use to process some of these things that you're seeing, Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, we in spite of all of the eclectic trends we're mentioning, we still are human beings with all of our human limitations. And I think we're finding that we just feel, many of us in our daily lives, like we are spread too thin, we're too distracted, we're too restless, and we would do better if we did less better. And we would do better if we were focused more on our immediate surroundings and the people we have in our lives. And if we invest there, we will see a higher degree of fulfillment. Doesn't mean it's easy to do because again, to do that, you're going against the grain of so much that's out there right now. So you have to plan for it, but you can plan for it. And
Mhm,
again, a lot of this
mhm.
also has to do with just where what gets your attention. You have a choice in the matter. When you're we've talked about this before. When you're on your phone, for instance, most of your attention, Nathan, you're really good at pointing this out. Most of your attention is largely passive. You're on the receiving end of just different images that are invading you at a very, very high speed. If you can take back levels of control, you find you're being more careful with your finite reserves of attention, and you can be more intentional about what gets your attention in the first place. And then also, incidentally, a beautiful byproduct of this is that you're going to find that your moods are regulated much better. And you did it without an edible.
So
You just did it the natural way. Yeah.
looky there, the no soma needed. Um, Cameron, I think some people will be listening to this and be like, "Why does this
Mm.
matter?" And the reason that it matters is because there's no such thing as a disembodied Christian, or the church is all about like discipleship is all about living locally well. So that's not to say that you have to live in the town that you grew up in, but you're missing like from the Garden of Eden to Acts 17, where Paul's arguing that God ordained the times and places that we would live, the times and places. I
Yeah.
mean, it's right there. Um, that we would reach out to him and find him, though he's not far from every one of us. Um, it's what we were created for. So I think there will have to be a future longing for a return to, hey, I want to have a spot where I can put down some roots, put a stake in the ground, and live like I am from here and have that mean something. And so therein lies the real work of the church is helping us understand our time and our place and not have every single thing be an option to us all the time. And that's really where we're shaped and we're formed and we're molded and we grow and we make contributions and we live something that approximates like actual human interaction and life, and that's where cultures come from and are developed and reputations are built and stories are told and families are raised and businesses are built and um the ethos of a place is developed when you have people are like, I'm here now, how do I do this well? And so the church flourishes in the manifestations of those elements of what it means to be a people together. And so I think there are Christians that feel a sense of a disembodied, like an excarnated sense of like the church experience doesn't really make sense to me. And it kind of doesn't if everything is an option. We're always on the move. Every 18 months, we're someplace else. Our attention is always somewhere else. We don't know any of our neighbors. We don't have a place like we feel like
Mm.
we belong. We don't have a group of people who has our back. We don't have a group of people that we know we're responsible for. We don't have a community in which we think we're investing. We don't see how we're contributing to anything around. Like you can just run this over and over again of saying, you were made for this. And so the hunger and thirsting that we have, and then the the whole litany of problems that fall out of not having that should just slow us down as Christians to think carefully about what it means to live in time, in space, in a place, to do less better. Um, is a really obviously we haven't stitched this all up in half an hour, but it's worth just putting a little timeout signal up here for a minute and saying, how do I think about how I want to invest the next 40 years of my life, and where do I really want to make a contribution? And is it to the advertising and marketing agencies in San Francisco that are making money from me staring at my screen? Or is there a better use of my mental focus and physical presence somewhere within a 1 mile radius of where I'm sitting right now? And it might turn out that the way we eat says something about that.
I like it. More to be said. More probably will be said in the near future. But you've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and international cuisine and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.